I saw them. There they were, kissing in the kitchen while everyone celebrated my granddaughter's birthday in the garden. My husband, Eduardo, and Camila, my friend for 30 years. Their lips pressed together, hands tangled, as if I didn't exist, as if our 40 years meant nothing. I froze in the doorway, the decorated cake trembling in my hands. No one noticed me. Children's music floated from outside, mingled with laughter, while my world crumbled in silence. The necklace Eduardo had given me a month ago for our anniversary gleamed at my throat, burning my skin like fire. I set the cake on the counter and backed away without a sound. In that moment I knew my life as I knew it was over. And I wasn't going to leave that party without everyone knowing the truth. I stayed silent, but I would not be forgotten. That scene didn't happen out of nowhere. To understand why it cut so deep, you need to know who I am. My name is Elena Navarro. I live in Mexico City in the house where we raised our children and where Sundays still smell like rice and mole. The street has jacarandas that drop petals in lazy storms in March, and the living room faces east so the mornings come in gold. I lived that house like a ledger, meals in one column, shift hours in another, small savings tucked in envelopes that smelled of laundry starch. I remember the sound of my own footsteps on those tiles at 5 a.m., heading to a night shift, carrying a thermos that always leaked just enough to leave a warm ring on the lid. I was a nurse for 35 years. I held hands that trembled with fever, I pressed compresses on foreheads that smelled of disinfectant and fear. I stitched uniforms by lamplight, fingers numb with fatigue, while the radio played boleros low and steady. There were nights I took doubles because someone had to pay a tuition, because one of the children needed a book, because the house's roof had that small, stubborn leak that only got worse in the rain. I learned how to be present and invisible at once, present for illnesses, for birthdays, for the paperwork, invisible when it came to my own small wants. I married young. We built a life on small economies and stubborn hope. Eduardo built his career a little faster than I expected. He had the ways and the charm and the job offers. He traveled for work sometimes, and I kept the home steady. The children came, 3 of them, each with their own stubbornness and grace. We raised them with the sort of steady hands I handed my patients, calm, practiced, unshowy. When the first grandchild arrived 6 years ago, I took early retirement to help my daughter Sophia. It felt right. I wanted to be there for the morning feedings, the first teeth, the scraped knees. I wanted to give back a presence I had once given to others in hospital corridors. Respect and loyalty have been my rulers. Not for show. Because I believed a family was a promise. Because my mother taught me that marriage is a fabric you mend instead of a dress you burn. Because my grandmother Antonia, she raised herself after she was widowed, used to say, a woman must be on her own 2 feet before she gives her hand to another. I carried that as both shield and map. We were not rich. We were not reckless. We had a routine that comforted me: market on Tuesday, laundry on Wednesday, visiting the clinic on Thursdays, Sundays for family lunches. Our money was ordinary, savings accounts with modest balances, a pension coming from years of nursing, Eduardo's retirement funds tucked somewhere into bureaucratic pages. We had the house. It creaked in winter. It had photographs on the mantelpiece, wedding photos, school faces, birthdays. The album that lived on the dining table was a kind of shrine. I dusted it as if polishing the years. I won't pretend everything was perfect. We argued like anyone does about bills, about the best time to remodel the kitchen, about the volume of the television. There were small tensions that we smoothed over. There were promises spoken soft and kept silent. I did more than my share, maybe. I also did it because I believed in the shape of things we had built. I thought those small sacrifices were investments in a shared life. That belief is why the sight of them in my kitchen did not feel like a single slap. It felt like the roof collapsing over a house I'd lived in for decades. People like to reduce long marriages to a single sentence. They had their ups and downs, and then move on. But life is a million small things. Meals cooked, lessons attended, nights awake, the particular smell of the garden after rain. Betrayal of this kind does not erase those things. It contaminates them. It puts a question mark on every moment that used to be proof of love. And when the betrayal comes from two places at once, the bed and the friendship desk, the damage doubles. I could tell you the exact weight of my hands that evening. The way the cake's icing trembled under my fingers. The taste of the lemon I had used to brush the top. Sensory things root us, don't they? They become proof. The necklace at my throat, bright and ridiculous, burned. That burning is not only physical. It was a geography, money spent, apologies given, anniversaries celebrated. It sat there like a jewel accusing me every time I looked in the mirror. I will not romanticize my anger. It was practical. It was precise. I thought of the many small ways trust is exercised: financial transparency, shared calendars, simple courtesy like asking before you borrowed something. I realized how many of those small acts had been missing without me naming it. Eduardo's phone became a small, dark stone in my pocket that week, heavy, secretive. Camila's visits became more frequent and less explained. A simple receipt changed color in my mind, from ordinary to evidence. The pattern formed like a pressed leaf. I have always disliked drama for the sake of drama. I was not going to shout in front of children. I would not ruin Lucia's birthday because of my pain. That is who I was, respectful to the bones. But there comes a time when respect must have boundaries, or it becomes silence in the face of theft. So in the days after that afternoon, I began to collect small things. Receipts. A velvet box with nothing in it. A photograph in a drawer that didn't belong there. A message that didn't quite disappear from a phone. Each small object was a stitch in the quilt of a larger truth. I photographed pages and saved them. I opened accounts quietly. I went to the bank with my head down and my hands steady. I made copies and left nothing to chance. There is a practical part to betrayal. It is not only broken hearts. It can be broken finances. It can be broken homes. To ignore that would be to pretend pain has no consequences. That refusal to be naive is not cruel, it is protection. After 40 years, I had earned the right to protect what I had built. A small confession, which I make softly because this channel is new and because your attention matters to women like me trying to speak. If you are finding this story meaningful, and if you could take a moment to subscribe, help me reach 1,000 subscribers, I'd be grateful. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from, your city and country. It helps this community breathe. Thank you. Call, 35 words. People asked me then if I wanted revenge. They conflated justice with spectacle. I wanted neither. I wanted clarity. I wanted the truth in light. I wanted to make choices with my eyes open. That is why I called Victoria the retired lawyer who had once helped my neighbor with a will. I asked her, calmly, what rights I had after 40 years. She listed things with a dry practicality that felt like stability: half of the marital estate, documentation, records, and, she said, Elena, you must prepare for defensiveness. Men often try to rewrite the story. So I prepared. I moved money into an account in my name. I took photographs of deeds and policies. I made a folder of the receipts and photos that did not fit a neat explanation of work dinners. I wrote 2 letters, one that said everything to Eduardo and another that I kept for myself, a reminder of who I had been and who I would choose to be. And the morning after, when the sun came in exactly the same way it had always done, the house felt like someone else. That's what grandparents do. Then Camila offered. Her voice was eager, like someone stepping back into a familiar room. I'll take the decorations, Elena. I love Lucia like my own. I hugged her. She had been at our side through births and funerals. She was part of our fabric. There was no reason to doubt. We cleaned. I stacked plates while Eduardo and Camila talked near the window in low voices. Their words were small then. I'll check the ceiling. The leak seemed worse. But the tone was a new thing, softer, shaded. They went quiet when I walked toward them. Eduardo said something about repairs and Camila praised the dessert too loudly. The album on the table lay open to our wedding page. I touched the photo where we stand hand in hand, both laughing as we cut the cake. It felt suddenly like someone had put a coin on a wound. Later that week, the small noises of life changed into a string of alarms. Eduardo looked at his phone with a smile and then shut it away. Camila came over with rolls of crepe paper and excuses that thinned each time. The neighbor, Dona Marta, who waters our front plants, began to glance longer when she passed. They look happy, she said once when Camila left with a box of napkins. Her eyes, though, were sharp. The micro-conflicts multiplied. Miguel missed a call from his father and later denied it. Patricia made a joke about work trips and received a tight smile in return. I remember the grocery run that Wednesday because it was ordinary, the light, the plastic bags, the list in my hand. I came home early and found Eduardo with the bedroom door shut, his voice tense through the wood. We have to be more careful. Elena doesn't suspect, but... He cut off when he saw me. I'll call you later, he lied. I set the bags down and asked his usual question, who were you speaking to? He named Miguel. I called Miguel and there was a silence so loud it became its own answer. Days later, Camila arrived to help me with party prep. I left my phone on the kitchen table. It rang as I walked away. Camila's reaction was immediate surprise, then a quick movement to hide something small. Sorry, it sounded important, she said, as if that explained the smallness of the act. Later I checked, parts of my messages had been deleted. Simple, digital erasure that suddenly felt like a finger pressed over a ticking clock. On Friday, while I folded sheets in our bedroom, a receipt slipped out from between the wardrobe boxes. A dinner at a place we had never visited. The date matched one of Eduardo's work trips. Next to it, a little velvet case, empty, the kind you give jewelry in. I opened his sock drawer and found a photograph of Camila wearing a bracelet I didn't recognize. I held it until my fingers went cold. That night, while Eduardo slept on the sofa with the remote slack in his palm, I quietly unlocked his phone. He had deleted most messages. Yet a photo remained in the gallery, Camila and him, smiling on a terrace, wineglasses catching light. Proof was a pale creature. It does not roar. It sits and waits. I lay awake until dawn, counting the pulse in my throat. I thought of all the nights I stayed at a hospital bedside and watched someone breathe through medicine. I thought of the peace that comes after. I also thought of the thinness of assumption. How many times had I accepted work as a reason? How many evenings had I smoothed over a suspicious tone because I did not want to know? The day of the party I dressed carefully. My blue dress, the one Eduardo had always liked. I put on the necklace he had given me last month, the one that now felt like accusation and memory at once. I applied makeup slowly, as if setting armor. The house filled with balloons and small feet. Lucia's joy poured through the rooms like music. Eduardo moved through guests with practiced charm. Camila directed other mothers with a hand that had once helped me in so many ways. At the moment the cake was due, I went to the kitchen. The back door was ajar, a small breeze stirring the paper lanterns. And there they were. Eduardo had Camila pressed against the wall. Their kiss was not furtive like a stolen thing, it was a declaration. My hands went numb. I stepped back. The cake slipped for a breath and then I laid it down as if I were setting down an accusation. I felt the air break in my chest like glass falling. I went out to the garden. Sophia came up to me, worry in her eyes. "Mama, are you all right?" she whispered. I said the least I could. "The cake is ready. I'll get the candles." Her face so innocent, so trusting was a new wound. I forced myself through the rest of the party like an actress. I sang, I clapped, I watched Lucia blow her candles with a smile that contained me in fragments. I let the children have their evening. I watched Eduardo and Camila exchange looks that felt private in a room full of witnesses. I smiled through goodbyes as if sealing a small, ordinary box. After everyone left, I sat in the dark of our room and replayed the years like a film with the sound off. I remembered picking up Eduardo from the hospital after his hip surgery and lifting him, careful and exhausted for 3 months. I remembered buying the suit for Patricia's wedding with extra shifts. I remembered cooking his favorite foods while he scrolled on his phone beside me. Grief has edges. At first it is sharp in one place, slowly it becomes an ice that travels. I cried until there were no tears left, then something else happened. A strange clarity arrived as if the fog had a small bright tear in it. The small everyday humiliations I had accepted for peace lined up like a ledger. This isn't just a cheating, I told the mirror later that night. It's a demolition. I was not a woman who shouted. I also was not a woman who would let my life be dismantled quietly. I made a choice then not of spectacle, but of terms. I would not break up a child's birthday. I would not scream when little ears might hear. But after the night was over, I would not return to the same home as if nothing had happened. I stayed silent, but I would not be forgotten. The small alarm started as whispers and then built into a chorus. I notice things in the way you notice a hairline crack in a teacup. At first you think it's nothing, then the whole cup feels unsafe in your hands. My hands felt unsafe that week. One afternoon I came back early from the mercado, bags soft with tomatoes and tortillas. The house smelled of grilled meat from the Sunday before, of lemon from the cake I had brushed, of a detergent Eduardo liked. I paused at the bedroom door because there was a voice behind it, low, hurried. I heard the words, "We have to be more careful. Elena doesn't suspect." The sentence stopped when the door opened and Eduardo forced a smile at me. I put the groceries down like they were evidence. He said it was Miguel on the phone. His eyes darted away, his hands found an excuse to tuck a receipt deeper into his wallet. I called Miguel the same afternoon. His silence on the line was an answer that made the kitchen tile turn thin under my feet. "No, Mama. It's been days since I spoke to him." His voice was small hurt or shock, I couldn't tell. A day later Camila arrived with rolls of crepe paper and that practice cheer she uses at family gatherings. She hugged me, too tight, with perfume that smelled of something not my city. I left my phone on the kitchen counter while I boiled coffee. It rang once and surprised both of us. Camila's hand went reflexively toward her purse, then she laughed too brightly and said, "Oh, it's the supplier." Later, when I checked my messages, strange gaps blinked at me, threads gone, words erased as if someone had smoothed the slate clean. Eduardo had never touched my phone before. I did not sleep well that night. I found the receipt by accident on Friday, folded and forgotten under a pile of shirts. It was from a restaurant I had never visited, stamped with a date on a day Eduardo swore he was on a work trip. Inside the sock drawer, beneath an old pair of argyles, I found the house filled with the soft chaos of children voices like wind chimes, the thud of small feet, laughter that belonged to another life. I wore the necklace Eduardo had given me last month and it felt heavy on my throat, a jewel that accused me every time I swallowed. I moved through rooms like someone performing a role she had practiced for decades. I checked the table, smoothed the tablecloth, adjusted a balloon that refused to stand perfect. The scent of cilantro and hot tortillas braided with sugar and candle wax. Sophia watched her daughter with a light in her eyes that cut at me. She believed in this afternoon as if none of us could break it. When it was time to fetch the cake, I went to the kitchen. The back door was open a crack, and sunlight drew a pale rectangle across the flagstones. At first I thought of children playing hide and seek. Then I saw two shadows on the wall and the air around them thick as syrup. Eduardo had Camila pressed against the plaster, and they were kissing with the kind of certainty you reserve for a future they had already decided upon. I remember the way their bodies spoke a language I had never learned, the tilt of his head, the loose hand at her waist, the laugh caught and gone. They spoke then, in voices that were too intimate for a house full of family. "We can't keep lying," Eduardo whispered. "She deserves the truth." Camila pressed her fingers to the bracelet at her wrist and said, "After the party." She smiled like the world belonged to them both. I set the cake on the counter because my fingers had gone suddenly numb. It wobbled and the icing quivered like a small animal hurt. I left it there and backed away so slowly I might as well have been a statue unthawed. The garden was bright and ordinary and cruel. Sophia came up behind me, her hands on my shoulders, voice soft with concern. "Mama, are you all right?" she asked. Her question was a small, tender blade. I answered in a lie because the child's laughter was a thing I would not break. "The candles," I said. "I'll get the candles." I found the box and handed them over with hands that would not stop shaking. The children sang as if nothing had been altered. Lucia's breath blew the flames and time folded over itself. I clung to the sound of that single moment, a child's victory like a life preserver. I finished the party in a trance. I folded paper plates, smiled, accepted compliments that stung. Camila hugged me when she left, perfumed and practiced. "You did everything perfectly," she said, and the words landed on me like a lie told with a pleasant face. Eduardo held my hand at the door for a second, a ghost of the man I knew, and then he moved away. I watched them walk into the afternoon together. When the house finally quieted, when the last car receded and the only sound was the refrigerator humming, I sat on the edge of our bed and let the memories pour in. I remembered nursing him after his hip surgery, how I had lifted him with my own aching back and carried the laundry at midnight. I remembered sewing uniforms under a street lamp for extra money, pausing only to count out the coins that would pay for Miguel's tuition. I remembered dinners I cooked while someone else scrolled and smiled at their messages. The grief at first was a sharp, specific knife. Then it spread like cold through a room, filling the corners I had once taken for granted. Tears came and then they stopped, as if they'd been used up. In that pause something else arrived, a clarity that glinted like a shard. I saw the ledger of my life open on the table, the small abrasions I had ignored, the favors taken for granted, the late-night excusing of his absences. "This isn't only a betrayal," I told my reflection in the dark. "It is a foreclosure on the life I thought we had." My voice was a measurement of what remained. I had been quiet because I thought peace required my silence. I had been faithful because loyalty was the spine of my family. But peace that depends on my erasure is not peace. It is surrender. So I finished the night with a decision folded into me like a secret. I would protect the children from my storm. I would not shatter Lucia's memory of this day. But afterwards, I would not return to pretending. At the first light I would stop being silent. The house was a theater of ordinary sounds the next morning. The kettle boiled. Canella slept in her corner. The sun came in the same angle it always did, and the sameness felt like mockery. I moved through routine by muscle memory: brush teeth, fold sheets, sweep floors, while the inside of me recalibrated to a new axis. I sat in the dark of the bedroom and let the small memories come not as comfort but as accusation. The nights I worked extra shifts to pay for Miguel's books. The vacations we never took because we had to save. The suit I bought from my overtime so Patricia would look sharp at her wedding. Those were not small, incidental things. They were my investments in a shared ledger. Now the ledger had been turned without my consent. I remembered my grandmother Antonia, who rebuilt herself at 70 after she was left alone. I heard her voice in the quiet: a woman must be on her own 2 feet before she gives her hand to another. That was not bravado. It was a rule she lived. The memory steadied me like a hand on the back when you cannot see the next step. Grief moved into an unexpected clarity. Anger sharpened into a tool. I thought of all the little permissions I had given without noticing: the permission to spend our money without asking, the permission to keep secrets close to the heart of our home. Someone had been rewriting the story of my life and signing their name under the script. I did not want revenge. I wanted boundaries. I wanted documentation. I wanted proof that could not be smudged by charm or explanation. So I made a list in my head: the deeds, the bank statements, the pension papers. I thought of practicalities: accounts, titles, policies. My nursing hands, used to counting pills and doses, counted assets now. Order and paperwork felt like a small hospital ward for a wounded life. That day I did not storm out. I did not make a spectacle. Instead, I moved quietly and with intent. I emptied a drawer and photographed the papers that mattered. I wrote down dates and items that did not fit. I copied the receipts I had found into a folder and labeled them like a nurse would label specimens. I typed a note for myself that read: "Do not trust charm. Trust records." When night came again, there was a book of letters on my dressing table. I had written one that morning to Eduardo and folded it into the envelope, but I had not signed it. It listed facts with a surgeon's calm: the dates, the receipts, the photos. The second letter, to myself, read in bolder ink the truth I needed to remember every day: you are not disposable. You are not silent by default. I told no one what I had done, not yet. I wanted to be certain before I asked others to step into the ring. My heart pounded with a mixture of fear and the relieved steadiness of someone who had finally found their map. I felt like a nurse preparing for a difficult but necessary operation. That night I slept in short bursts and woke with a plan almost fully formed. I would not allow the house to stay a theater of lies. I would prepare quietly. I would call an old friend who had once helped with a will. I would open a separate bank account. I would get copies of everything. Not because I wanted to punish. Because I wanted to be safe. I had loved and given. Now I would protect what I had earned. At dawn I would begin the work of making it official. Dawn came thin and pale through the curtains. My chest felt like a room someone had locked and left the key inside. I waited until Eduardo left for his run before I moved. My hands shook not from fear but from the cold clarity that had settled into my bones. I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer where we kept the envelopes, and began to sort. Paper after paper: deeds, policy numbers, bank statements, each one a small lifeline. I photographed them with my phone, labeled the images, and sent them to my email address. Habit and training took over. It felt like charting a patient who could not speak for herself. I dialed Victoria with the phone between my shoulder and ear, folding and unfolding a napkin as if by doing so I could steady the rhythm of my thoughts. Her voice was a familiar instrument, calm, blunt. To the clinic where Eduardo had his hip surgery, to the pension office, to an old friend who ran a small notary. Each contact was a stitch in a net I was casting around my life. I learned how to ask for what I needed without giving away what I knew. That skill felt like a new muscle. At noon I called Camila. I told myself it was brave. I told myself it was necessary. Her voice was light when she answered, as if nothing heavy lived behind the syllables. "How are you after the party?" she asked. Her tone was casual. My throat closed. "Can you come by at 4?" I asked. "Eduardo will be at his club meeting." I put the date on my calendar and then I went to the closet where our old letters were kept. I found an envelope I had written earlier that week and never signed. I slid it out and re-inked the edges with words that were sharp but precise. I would speak clearly, I thought. Not to accuse for the sake of spectacle. To document and set terms. My voice practiced the order of things like someone rehearsing a medical procedure. I prepared the room. On the dining table I laid out what I had found, the restaurant receipt, the velvet box lid without the trinket, prints of messages, a photo recovered from Eduardo's gallery. I placed them like specimens on a tray. The house smelled of coffee and old polish and a faint perfume that was not mine. I folded a second letter, this one for myself, and in the margin I wrote the rules I would keep that night. No shouting, no begging, protect the children, show the facts. I called my children, one by one. I did not tell them everything. I told them simply, "Come tomorrow. I need you here." Miguel's voice carried anger and confusion. Patricia cried but said she would be there. Sophia's, of course, mommy, was the kind that came with questions left unasked. They sounded like lifelines and like fragile supports. I packed a small bag of essentials and put the rest of our life into files in a drawer I could close. I slept in short fits and woke sometimes to the sound of the kettle. Each time I rose it was with a practiced calm. I was not being dramatic. I was being practical. I had been a nurse for 35 years. I knew how to allocate strength, how to triage pain. This felt like an operation. If I screamed, the family would scatter in shock. If I waited, I could cut precisely. I chose precision. I had a final thing to do before the bell rang. I wrote the last line of the letter for Eduardo. It was a clean sentence. I will not surrender what I have earned. I folded the paper without sealing it. I put it on top of the documents and sat back in the chair until the light in the room blurred. The world went narrow to the edges of the table, the small room where evidence and dignity were aligned. At 4 o'clock the bell rang. Camila stood on my threshold like a woman trying to make the world feel normal. She still wore the bracelet. It flashed when she raised her hand in greeting. Her smile arrived late, as if she had rehearsed it in a mirror. She stepped inside and the perfume followed her, citrus and something too sharp for Sunday. "Please, sit," I said. My voice had the softness of someone who has practiced calm. The dining room felt staged and ordinary, and in that ordinariness I felt dangerous, not because I wanted harm, but because I was holding the truth like a scalpel. Her eyes flicked to the table, to the spread of receipts and photographs. For a second there was a shudder of recognition and then a performance, flustered remorse. "Elena, she started, but I lifted a hand. "Don't," I said. The gesture was small, it was also a boundary. "Don't rehearse. I need honesty." My fingers found the velvet box lid and I lifted it like evidence in court. Camila's breath left her in a small whoosh. She had not imagined this. The first file I pushed forward was the receipt from the restaurant. I pointed to the date and to the amount, to the initials on a credit slip. You were together here, I said. No flourish. No accusation as performance. Just data. She swallowed. Next I showed the photograph I had recovered from Eduardo's phone, smiling faces on a terrace. She turned pale enough that the color left the room. Her hand went to her mouth. We didn't mean to hurt you, she murmured, like an apology offered to a doorframe. Came too late for that, I said. The words were small and true. 2 years, Camila. 2 years of meetings and dinners and Sunday afternoons that did not exist for me. My heartbeat made a sound in my ears. My hands were steady now. The folder felt light because it was a thing I could name. A voice sounded at the door, Eduardo's. He crossed the threshold with the casual step of a man who expects normal. He carried his satchel, the same satchel he had always carried when leaving for the day. When he saw the table he froze, as if someone had held a hand in front of the light. For a second he looked as if he might laugh off the expression on my face, but then his eyes landed on the documents and his shoulders folded in a way that cannot be faked. What is this? He asked, like a man who was trying a new script. Sit, I said. The room was small. The three of us were closer than distance allows. Sit and be honest. He sat, and his fingers twisted the strap of his satchel as if tying a knot could anchor him. He tried the old lines: tired work, loneliness, feeling taken for granted. He reached for tones that had once calmed me. They did not work. The ledger of our life sat between us, and it was the witness to all those stories. You've been spending money, I said. On dinners, travel. You bought gifts and hid them. You lied about trips and meetings. I tapped the bank statements I had printed. You made choices without me. He opened his mouth and closed it. Elena, you know we've had problems, he said. I never wanted. His voice cracked on the word. There was a half plea there, like a hospital patient offering a confession that won't heal the wound. I do know, I replied. But knowing is different from allowing what you've done to erase me. The phrase landed like a clinical report. I am not asking for revenge. I am asking for fairness. The house will be sold. The assets divided. I will move near Sofia. I will have what I worked for. Camila's shoulders buckled. She began to cry in a thin, irregular rhythm. Please, Elena. We can still talk tomorrow, I said firmly. My children will be here tomorrow. You'll tell them then. Not because I need to punish you, but because they deserve to know who has been a father to them and who has been our guest. Eduardo's defense turned brittle. He tried to blame my busyness, to make his choices look like a consequence of my absence. He used the old script: you weren't there, I was lonely. It sounded small. It sounded false. The ledger did not care about loneliness. The ledger kept numbers and places and receipts. I slid the unsent letter to him across the table. I wrote this before I knew everything, I said. Read it. He unfolded the paper with the same hands that once smoothed my hair. He read the list of facts I had written: dates, meetings, transactions. His face went through shades: disbelief, shame, anger. When he looked up, there were no words that could make the ledger disappear. A neighbor knocked on the door, a small interruption, a world outside our triangle. She had come to return a missing plate. She paused in the doorway as if the house had become a scene she could not enter. She backed away slowly. Small world. Small witness. The sound of the door closing felt like a seal. Kayla, but I did not forget. Kayla, but I did not forget. Elena, Eduardo said finally, voice thin. What do you want? Safety, I said. Dignity. The record of what I have earned. Respect. He tried to rewrite stories as if facts were gossip. Victoria stood like a quiet, implacable ally and taught me how to listen to law without losing my humanity. We sold the house. We divided what had been shared. It was legal. It was not easy. It was necessary. My children reacted in different colors. Miguel was angry at his father and at the waste of trust. Patricia cried for days and then, like all of us who have to keep living, started to sort out how to love a parent who made such choices. Sophia grieved the loss of a woman she had called aunt and, after many conversations, began to set her own boundaries. Our Sunday meals continued, but the rhythm changed. We fed each other on purpose now. We were consolidating what mattered. People offered opinions, neighbors who remembered our family as a unit, friends who said forgiveness is easy to give but not always wise. Some urged reconciliation as if it were a simple moral polish. I listened and then returned to my own measure. Forgiveness is a private act. Reconciliation requires safety. I can forgive to unburden myself. I do not have to let the betrayed into my life as if nothing happened. I returned to a book club I had left years ago and to a yoga class for older adults where balance is literal and metaphorical. I learned the thrill of a camera lens that sees light in ordinary things. A photograph I took of the park was accepted for a small local exhibit. Standing in the gallery and seeing my name on the wall felt like reclaiming a stranger's respect for myself. I stayed for the opening even though part of me wanted to hide. The nights remain quiet sometimes in ways that ache. Habit and history haunt the bed, the house, the spaces where two people once slept without a full knowledge of each other. But morning brings coffee made exactly how I like it, and that small decision tastes like permission. I pack Lucia a sandwich she likes and carry her small paintings to the fridge like trophies. I am present, not as a martyr but as someone who chose presence on her own terms. I have not spoken to Camila since that afternoon. Some people called to ask if I had thought about reaching out. I have my reasons. Distance is a boundary that heals. It is also a rule I give myself, safety first. My life at 62 is not a life of endings, but of active continuations. I learned that dignity can be rebuilt with small, steady acts. There is a simple sentence I say to myself sometimes when doubt creeps in. I remained silent, but I was not forgotten. It reminds me that quiet endurance is different from surrender. I chose to stop giving away pieces of myself in the name of peace. If you are still listening, thank you for staying with me. If you've been in a place where someone dismissed your worth, where loyalty was taken as a license to erase you, please share a line in the comments. Your city, your voice. It matters. We are not alone. Are you ready to remember what you are worth?